right, everybody, you have made it. We are here. It is part 4 of our book club series. We have covered 4 of the short stories from Stephen King's book, You Like It Darker. And today we are tackling our 5th story titled Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. Robert, what is this about?
Danny Coughlin keeps having the same nightmare over and over again. There's a gas station in the middle of nowhere with a body out behind it. A dog is involved, and he's eating the hand of the body. Danny tries to ignore this, but night after night, the dream comes to him. So he drives out there to confirm that the nightmare is more than just a bad dream, and he actually discovers the body of a young girl. Danny, attempting to do a good deed, alerts the police, but now he finds himself as the prime suspect for the murder of Yvonne Wickers.
Hey, this one here is tagged. Really, mystery is the big one. It's a very mystery drama. There really isn't a ton of horror to this one in my mind, but it really weighs heavy in that mystery tag.
Yeah, for sure, dude. I'd say like mystery, crime, thriller. Danny's like your likable enough protagonist. He's like a divorced dude. He's a school custodian. He lives in a small town. He's just getting by in life, and he's, finding little things day by day that makes him happy. I think early in the book, he mentioned something about, you can't live in the past. So he stopped worrying about the past. He doesn't worry about the future. He just kind of lives in the now and goes day by day. And he keeps having that nightmare. And he Googles it because for whatever reason, my man's like, I want to know if this is a real gas station. It is. And he drives out to the gas station and sees the dog and the body. And the way this dude, I'm going to let you take it from here, dude. The way this guy reports the crime to the police is like 101 and, hey, make me a murder suspect.
So I agree with that 100%. So my man goes to the, if I remember correctly, goes to the closest other gas station or town and buys a burner phone.
Yeah.
So you buy a burner phone to report a murder victim or a body. I don't know if he knows it's a murder victim, but I'm sure he assumes it's a murder victim because, here's a dead body behind a vacant gas station. Put a couple things together. But then he gets the burner phone, calls it in, and they're like, well, what's your name and who are you? And he goes, please, you got to get there and help her. You got to help her. She's back there by herself. There's a dog, and he even puts like a trash can over her hand.
Yeah,
so
he puts like a barrel over or something. Yeah. So
the dog doesn't continue eating the body. But so he does all these things and he does a lot of things wrong, which kind of leads to why sometimes some of the investigators are like, well, I mean, if he's like this genius, why did he report the crime in such a dumb way? And so he definitely did. Yeah. Like you said, it's like red flags everywhere, which is why I think that even if I was an investigator, I'm like, nah, he did it.
Yeah.
He did it.
100%.
He wants people to start calling him some sort of serial killer name so he can watch the news and, get famous or whatever. But yeah, so it was very shifty, but yeah.
Yeah, it was shifty, dude. So like he reported it with the burner phone, even went as far as to pay with the burner phone in cash, making him look even more suspect. He's like, he starts to use his debit card. He goes, hold on, am I dumb? It's like, yeah, Danny, you are. What are you doing, dude?
Well, and I think too, like when you think about this scene, the way that he does this beginning, because there is all the things, and it's Stephen King, and we tend to overthink Stephen King books anyway.
Absolutely.
It made you think, okay, well, what is actually happening? What is he legitimately hiding? Even though we're seeing things from his point of view and we're hearing from him, and like you said, very likable character, it made it hard to trust him 100% because of this dumb move.
It did, and I would have to go back and like skim to see, but I don't remember him ever saying why he put the barrel over and reported the crime the way he did, like what his thought process was in doing this, like why he wanted to remain anonymous. I don't know. Honestly, I can't remember if it was even mentioned, but this book's written during like COVID years. Cell towers exist, security cameras everywhere. This dude thought because he paid cash with the burner phone, he's going to be So Yeah, I 100% was not surprised when the two investigators, Ella Davis and Frank Jailbert, showed up. They were like KBI officers, and the first thing they do are like, "Okay, he did it." It's like, yeah, I mean, I get it. Yeah, I see why you would think he did it.
And the way Davis is even questioning him is from an angle of like, I know you did this. Why don't you just come clean?
Right.
You know, you're going to feel so much better. And, you know, I know we'll get into more of the Jailbert stuff here a little later in this discussion, but he was one of my, and I know he's an unlikable dude, but he was one of my favorite characters I've read about in a long time, just from just all the things he had going on. I just found him to be just a very interesting character, well-written character, you know, just a lot of things where I was just like, man, I don't like him. Like, I would not want this dude investigating me for anything. But also at the same time, I was like, this dude's like, I don't know, just a very good character for the story.
Yeah, dude. He reminded me of like those serial killer documentaries or a show I used to watch where like the detectives or the leads in these they have to be as smart as the killers. So they try and get in that mindset. Like if this story would have flipped in a way where Jailbert was the killer, I wouldn't have even been surprised.
Dude,
that's how whacked out he is.
Yes.
But, so it wouldn't have even shocked me. Ella she was like just kind of a cookie cutter character, like your typical like by the book cop. She actually was the way a police officer I feel should be, like innocent until proven guilty. Like she was kind of at first hard in on like, yeah, he did it. But as she got to talk to Coughlin and kind of picked up on some cues, like at one point, Frank's like, hey, take his DNA. Because he lied and said there was like, you know, DNA left on the corpse. And Danny's like relieved. He's like, yeah, please take my DNA.
Yes.
And Ella was kind of like, okay, maybe he is innocent because I saw this relief in his face when we were doing the DNA swab. And shortly after that happens, like Danny has what he referred to in the book as the week of hell, where every single day his life just progressively gets worse after Frank and Ella arrive in town. Like he had to fire one of his coworkers because they were late. And then Frank Jailbert leaked the details of the investigation to the local ad paper, which was like a coffee talk style deal. And after that story leaked, the next day, Danny loses his job due to budget cuts, but it was because he was, you know, prime suspect in a murder case. And then the next one where Jailbert kind of oversteps his position a little bit, like he runs into Danny at the supermarket and he makes this big scene in the small town of people about question Danny. And he's working in this way, all in a way to get Danny to confess to something because they don't have enough to just outright arrest him. There's not enough evidence for them to bring him in.
Yeah. You know, I think we're far enough into talking about this now where I think it would be, you know, okay to talk about some of Gilbert's stuff, Frank's stuff where he counts.
Yeah.
And he does that all the time. He talks about it. And what do you remember exactly what that was called again?
It was arithmomania.
Arithmomania. Yeah. So he counts everything. So he'll be like, it takes 4 steps to get here, 4 steps to get here with 1 chair, 4 + 1 is 5. You know, he would do all these things. And so sometimes he would just randomly spout out a number. And so, you know, every night it seems like it was like a closing thing in the chapter of this where he'd be in his hotel room. He goes, I got to walk the chairs. Walking the chairs helps. I need to walk the chairs, you know? And so he's talking about Coughlin and he believes he did it with all his heart that he did it. And so he's walking the chairs trying to figure out how he did it. And as he's counting, helps him go to sleep. It's just the most, and I know I talked about that earlier about him being one of my favorite characters in this. And I think it's because out of all the characters, he was the one that felt the most complex in a lot of ways. Because even Danny, like you said, Danny's just your likable dude. If you're playing a video game and you took the good route, you know, it seems like all of Danny's answers feel like the answers that you would take to to play the good role. He's not really neutral. He's just like that good. Ella Davis, same way. She's just like your very stereotypical police officer who is a partner to somebody who starts to kind of believe. There's some of those things that are like tropes that you kind of see and maybe you've seen a little bit before, but I think Frank is that wrench thrown into this where he's just got some things going on that are just a little bit different and bizarre in some ways, or unique to us, and makes him, so he's one of those what was that dude's name in Game of Thrones? Joffrey.
Okay.
You know how Joffrey was the dude that is that his name? Joffrey?
Hey bro, ain't nobody like Joffrey.
But
Joffrey's the worst.
Exactly. But he's so bad that he was good, right? Like for the show, like people just
everybody loves someone to like they just want to see fail. Joffrey was
so
that
I feel like Frank's that guy. I think he's the dude who, in this story, for me at least, he was kind of that light for me where I'm like, dude, you need this dude. I cannot stand this dude, but if he wasn't here, the
story wouldn't be as good. Like you need that. Like this guy is so convinced that Danny Coughlin is full of, for his dream. He's like, there's no way you dreamed this. You just dreamed the exact location of a murder body or of a body. You dreamed the exact location where a murderer stashed the body, and you just happened to drive out there. And he refuses to believe it, dude. And Danny literally just does everything in his power to prove his innocence. He's like, look, dude, here's my cell phone. It's yours. It'll show you the location of everywhere I have been for months. Here's my truck. Go swat, do whatever you need to do. Clean it up. You'll find nothing. I'll take a polygraph. And Frank's like, nah, because psychopaths can beat the polygraph. Yep. You're a psychopath. And Frank's really the psychopath in the story. But that arithmomania disorder, which is something I love when books make me do this, like it was so bizarre and so out there. I went to Google. I wanted to see if this thing was real. So I Googled it, and it actually is, dude. It's a disorder where you just constantly count things in your head and make abstract calculations out of nothing or out of just random things. So like he calls that newspaper and he leaks Danny's investigation. Well, the newspaper had 5 options. Well, his arithmomania starts getting so bad, he just starts randomly spouting out numbers in conversation. It's something Ella picked up on. And when Ella's asking the newspaper, like, hey, do you have a recording of who called in? Well, Frank had used a voice decoder, so you didn't know it was him. But the actual smoking gun that gave him away was his counting, because he just randomly says 15.
Yeah.
And Ella's worked with him enough that she knows, okay, there was 5 things on this. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 plus 3 is 6. 6 plus 4 is 10. 10 plus 5 is 15. Frank leaked it. Which it led to a cool scene with her confronting him in his hotel room. And that's where I thought the stinger was going to come. Because this whole story is like Frank's trying to catch Danny. He becomes more bold. He even goes as far as to like plant cocaine in this dude's car.
Yeah.
Like it gets crazy. And I'm just like, okay, this whole book has been Frank trying to catch Danny doing something. And Danny trying to prove his innocence, and it's like it gets progressively worse as it goes. Is Frank going to end up being the murderer? And when Ella meets him in the hotel room, I thought that's where we were going. Okay, here we go. Frank's about to snap.
Yeah, it's I mentioned this last week with our other episodes, and I feel like I should do this again. The voice acting for this book was top notch. The dude doing this, I'm telling you, he's amazing at it. One of my favorite actors anyway, but it was cool because on that scene, they actually used a voice coder for that. Oh, and so he's doing all this. So it's like her, oh, you might want to do this and it's going to do blah, blah, blah. And at the end it goes 15. And you're like, what? And you're like, oh, dude, there it is. So it was just kind of funny. I laughed. I chuckled. I was like, well, there you go. She's like, it's him. It's Frank, But it was just kind of, that whole thing was really wild to me because he would just be having conversations with anybody. And he's like, in the middle of something, even when he was confronting Danny at the school, and he's holding the newspaper. And then I think at the end he goes 23. And then he's like, what? And he goes, nothing, what? You know, like,
Yeah, he
it's
didn't
like,
even
what are you
realize he was doing it.
exactly. And so it's just one of those things. And, he always talked about it. And I think this is why we were always kind of led down the path of like, well, what's going to actually happen is because even when he would count in his hotel room, he goes, well, this is harmful. This doesn't hurt anybody. This is okay for me to do because this is not harmful. It doesn't hurt anybody,
Right.
which I think gave us all wild predictions, which I know we will talk about here in a little while. But anyway, yeah, it's very interesting stuff.
I was actually surprised when Frank didn't like attack Ella or turn out. He was just like a dude who had his own disorder, and that disorder helped him solve cases. He just could not let go of the fact that Danny might be innocent. He was just like, no, I have everything. The gut tells me it was him. So Danny is still wrongfully accused. And he actually, because of this accusation, he ends up shot by the murder victim's brother. Dude just gets wasted. And he goes to the hospital. And while he's in the hospital, it's revealed that the actual serial killer has been caught, that he's been going state to state, picking up hitchhikers, murders them and disposes of their bodies in rural areas. I think it's like 3 or 4 states he did it in.
Yeah, like Illinois, what was it? Illinois, Washington, and then wherever they were or something like
Kansas.
that. Kansas, yeah.
And it's even like after the serial killer's revealed, like, hey, we caught him. Frank does not let go. He's like, Danny's involved. Danny's this guy's wingman. That's why Danny's truck was clean, because they were doing it all in this van. Danny's involved in all of this.
They're team killers is what he kept saying. He goes, this wouldn't be the first time. This has happened before. And just to show how good Danny is. Again, if you're looking at an RPG game and you have that little side screen that goes, how are you going to respond to this next question? When his lawyer's in the hospital and he says, hey, like what they caught him. He goes, caught who? The guy who shot me? He goes, no, the actual killer. And then Danny asks the lawyer later, like, well, what happened to the kid? And they're like, well, he made bail. And so they're going to press, have these things. But even Danny at that moment's like, well, I don't want to press charges. Dude's been shot in the gut, has surgery, doesn't know what's going to happen. He knows he's probably going to recover to some degree, but they're like, this is going to be a hard recovery, that kind of thing. He got shot in the gut, which is just a different kind of thing. And so, Danny was just this dude who's just a stand-up guy. He's like, well, I don't want to press charges on him. I want him to be okay, kind of thing. And so, but Frank's like, nah, bro, Danny still did it. I don't care what they say. I don't care that there's another killer out there on the loose that's been doing this. Danny did it with him. They did it to her together, all that kind of stuff. So he just couldn't let it go. And then I'll let you close us out with the ending of this, which
Danny threw me for a loop too, dude. Danny has a different dream in the hospital. He dreams there's going to be a shooting at the hospital, specifically involving someone down at the nurse's station from him. He knows it's going to be Frank. So he calls Ella and he's like, hey, I need you to get to the hospital quick. You're not going to be able to call the police. Frank's smart enough. He's going to have them divert it, which he did. He called the local police sheriff and was like, hey, bomb threat at the school. So every cop in that area is at the school because they have a bomb threat, while Frank's on his way to shoot up Danny in the hospital. And he called Ella. Ella ends up getting there, and it was a really cool, tense scene. The ending was really rad for what the story was. It was a thrilling conclusion. I don't know if I should spoiler alert at the ending. What's up, dude?
Dude, we're doing it. We're a book club at this point. So if you're listening to us right now, hopefully you read the story. If you haven't and you want to stop now and go check this out, go do that. But go ahead and give us the ending. Dylan, close your ears if you're going to read this, bro.
Yeah. Our boy Arithmomania Frank, even in the end, he's got the numbers going on. And he actually just counts down, and instead of like killing someone that's innocent, he could not handle the fact that Danny could be innocent, and he didn't know what was going on with himself. And unfortunately, my man took his life. Yeah. And he even did it as he was counting down in his little way that he does. So, dude, it was a conclusion to the story. Danny ended up being innocent all along. He got his happy ending. You kind of feel sad for Frank. The guy, was doing his job, and he was on this. He did this for like 20 plus years, and his head just got the better of him in the end.
Well, and they even talked about, I mean, decorated, for several awards and all the things that happen when you're a celebrated police officer, detective kind of deal. I don't know of the inner workings of that world, but they talked about it in here, how that's just who he was. He was a well-liked and well-respected in his field. And so, yeah, it ended up ending that way. So I think this is a good time for us to kick into the lightning round,
Sure.
especially because of this first question. So I think we mentioned in the Discord, and I think most of our friends who are in the Discord reading this with us, again, if you want to be a part of that, we highly encourage you to do so. All of us were wrong in our predictions. So, Robert, go ahead and you can start us off. Give the predictions that you had when it came to this book, and tell us how wrong you were, because I was definitely wrong in all mine.
I was way wrong on Danny, actually. Like the bad dream thing. There was a point in the story where Danny talked about, like, okay, I was married and, my wife left me. I was an alcoholic. And then I had a friend, and we would go to all these bars and we would get so trashed. And one night we had a big blowout fight, and I woke up with the worst hangover, and me and my best friend never talked again. So I was like, is Danny actually doing these murders? Like, he just gets so blitzed out on alcohol that he does this and then just forgets about it. And then his dreams are like subconsciously like, hey, you did this. Like, that's kind of where I thought it was going for a minute. And I'm actually happy to be wrong. You know what? I'm glad I overthink things sometimes. And it was just what it was. And it was just a guy who was in the wrong place at the wrong time and did a bonehead, stupid way to report a crime.
So my big prediction was, so in the beginning I was like, well, I just don't know how it's not this guy, in a lot of ways. But then I started kind of shifting thoughts. And a lot of this came from the way Frank was in his hotel when he kept talking like counting's best because counting doesn't hurt people. And he would be like, I got to do this for dear sweet Yvonne. I got to get justice for dear sweet Yvonne. Yeah. And so in my mind, I started twisting things around. I'm like, wait, Frank's killing these people, and his way of getting them justice is to make sure somebody pays for the thing that happened. That's what I'm thinking in my mind, is that Frank maybe even doesn't know that he's doing it, or whatever the case may be. And it's just this battle of just supernatural beings coming against each other in some way. I think I overthought this too, because again, it is Stephen King, and this ending felt so normal for what it was to me in a way. Like, when all of it is said and done, Danny ends up being a good guy.
Right.
Ella Davis gives him a hug, and she's like, I'm so sorry for the fact that we treated you so terribly. Frank ends up looking like the bad guy and ends up taking his own life. All of a sudden, Danny becomes a celebrated dude. All of it feels so happy ending-ish. I know that Frank ends up killing himself, and that's, you got to kind of feel for a dude who's lost himself in that way. But at the end of the day, you look at it, you're like, the good guy is free and he's going to go on and live his life normal. It does not feel like a Stephen King story in a lot of ways. It depends, I guess, on how you look at it. If you look at it as Frank as the main character, then yeah, I guess it does feel like a Stephen King story. But yeah, the ending felt so different than what I expected. And so I think I tried to make more out of this in the way that I was like sitting there trying to process what was happening. So
dude, I think everyone knows Stephen King is like the master of horror, but this dude can write true crime like a dream, man. Joyland, the book Joyland, I've talked about on this show before, is a gem of his I love. The Bill Hodges trilogy, and then last year's phenomenal Holly. Like, yeah. I love when he stays grounded in reality and gives us like crime thrillers or monsters that can appear in real life. And that's largely what this story is, dude. Like 150 pages, 70 chapters, super quick read. So far, my favorite one in the collection.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm making that statement right here. It's my number one. It jumped over Two Talented Beasts.
I don't think so. Two Talented Bastards felt so different in the way that it felt. It just felt like the story made sense to me, and it felt complete. It felt like everything from start to finish felt like a thing.
Yeah.
I think you even mentioned a little bit, maybe off air, that this felt like you're like at the end, you're like, whoa.
I do think the ending felt rushed. If I had a criticism, I feel like this book could have went longer, and I think he may have had ideas for it to go longer because he kind of touched on Danny's brother Stevie a little bit, who lived out in Colorado, and Danny was on his way out there to get out of town, and I feel like that's part 2 of this book that just never happened. And the ending, like Yvonne's brother just showing up out of the blue and shooting Danny and sent him to the hospital, like all that just felt very rushed to get to a conclusion to me.
Yeah. Well, even having another serial killer out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
It all just turns himself in because he got stabbed by a woman he was trying to, take advantage of. So it's like all this stuff that you're like, whoa, what just happened,
Yeah.
And I think that's why maybe Two Talented Bastards still sits in the, I love how you have to say it that way.
You have to.
It still sits at the top for me because it just feels as if that story felt very complete. I don't know. But anyway, all right, let's keep it moving. If someone you knew was under investigation for murder, would you treat them the way Danny was treated by his neighbor? So if Dylan, I know that you didn't read this one. You can answer this one first and kind of kick us off. Basically, Danny's suspected of murder. People treat him terribly because they're like, this dude killed this woman. They don't care about the facts. They don't care if there's no evidence against him. They're just like, he did it. We don't want him here. Dylan, are you treating Danny poorly?
Listen.
we're at the point where listen hits before every answer.
Guilty until proven innocent.
Wow.
All right, Robert.
Man, like, I don't know if I'm going to go out of my way like the neighbors in this book did, like throwing bricks at this dude's house, putting dog crap in his mailbox. Hey, he lived in a trailer park and they were all like, hey, we've collectively decided as a community, like, you got to go. We're done with you. Get out of here. Like, I don't know if I'd do that, but I would definitely kind of have a little side eye. Like,
sure.
If you walked up to me and you were like, the suspect in a murder trial and
you're not watching my kids,
you were a bro, and it's like, hey man, what's new? Like, maybe like, hey, yeah, you're that guy avoiding Target now, man.
You're not going hiking with them out in the middle of nowhere for just two couple bros.
Like, I ain't gonna go out of my way to be like rude or like make this person. I don't know, dude. I'm not a cop. I ain't the person who's judging you for this crime, but I'm not gonna chum it up with you at the bar and have a pint either.
That's a fair answer. I think it's just, in those situations, it's best to keep a little bit of distance until things are cleared up. All right. What's your favorite true crime series? This can be anything, really. This could be something fictional, non-fictional. This can be a podcast, TV show, movie. Dylan, kick it off for us.
I'm a big Criminal Minds fan.
Ooh, nice. That's a good one.
That's a good answer, dude. Respect.
I'll go next. There was a podcast called Up and Vanished, which was the podcast that got me into podcasts in the beginning. Robert, I think I called you one day when we first when we first started talking about podcasts. I was like, we should start an investigative podcast.
We've gone everywhere with this.
we really have. But dude, that podcast was crazy because this dude, there was a woman who went missing in Georgia back in like the 80s. And he went and investigated this thing. And as he's investigating it, stuff's legitimately turning up because he's stirring the pot so much. And the people who actually did the crime actually came on the podcast before they were revealed as people who were the dudes who did the crime. So it's like a crazy
they do that stuff, dude.
Yeah, so it was like
flying.
That thing was crazy. So yeah, that was probably the one where I was like, whoa, that's wild. What about you, Robert?
So, dude, I have a nonfiction and a fiction answer. The nonfiction, I'm going to go a podcast like you, and I'll say Serial, which my wife was obsessed with, and she actually told me to listen to it. And it was about a guy who was wrongfully accused for murdering his girlfriend in high school, and then he spent like 20 plus years in prison, and he was let out of prison largely because of this podcast led to him getting a retrial because of all the misinformation of evidence and the way it was spread. So Serial was a good one. And then my fictional answer is going to be Mindhunter on Netflix. based on the 1995 book of the same name, authored by John Douglas. The series follows Agent Holden Ford and Bill Trench, I think his name was, and they a psychologist, Wendy Carr, they operate like the FBI's behavioral science unit. So they essentially, it's at the jump of it when they start interviewing serial killers to try and figure out what makes them tick. So it was like fact with fiction sprinkled in. Like, it was a really good show, dude. I'm sad it's over.
That's cool. Well, guys, as you can tell, this is just another really cool short story by Stephen King. And so we can't close out a segment here without, not the wrong one there, without giving our 3 words to close it out. Robert, what you got?
Never sleep again.
Hey, mine's walk the chairs. Poor Frank. Poor Frank.